from the contested fields of Sumy and the strategic shifts in Kursk. The whispers of ceasefire amid renewed long-range strikes. The Russia-Ukraine war's trajectory remains a volatile enigma. Recent reports detail Ukraine's withdrawal from the Sudzha while maintaining presence in Russia's Kursk region. A stark reminder of the conflict's fluid nature. The US-Russia talks led by Rubio and Lavrov hint at potential diplomatic avenues, even as European allies intensify economic pressure and military aid. Will the new US weaponry tip the balance? Can revived energy talks bridge the chasm? As Trump's views ripple through the Kremlin and Kiev, the world watchers wondering, will these guns ever fall silent? Will this trajectory war ever really come to an end? Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The policy news organization Politico has reported that a significant diplomatic move has emerged as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov engaged in direct talks focusing on a potential Ukraine ceasefire. This follows recent U.S.-Ukraine agreements and prior discussions in Saudi Arabia indicating a renewed push for de-escalation. The conversation addressed next steps to implement understanding reached in Riyadh, signaling a concrete effort to build upon previous diplomatic engagement. Notably, both sides agreed to restore communication channels, a critical step towards resolving the complex conflict. This broader discussion underscores the interconnectedness of the global conflict and the delicate balance required in international relations. According to the Economic Times, the diplomatic efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war intensifies, with the U.S. proposing a ceasefire accepted by Kiev, but met with cautious conditions from Moscow. Putin's reservations, citing battlefield advantages and raising serious questions, highlights the complexities of achieving peace. Simultaneously, U.S.-Russia discussions following talks in Saudi Arabia focus on next steps, emphasizing the restoration of communication channels. Yet despite these diplomatic overtures, Ukraine reports ongoing Russian drone attacks, casting doubt on Russia's commitment to a ceasefire. International pressure mounts, with the UK urging an unconditional cessation of hostilities. Zelensky accuses Putin of delaying peace to gain military leverage, further complicating the already fragile diplomatic landscape and underscoring the deep mistrust between the warring parties. The Russia-Ukraine war's end remains elusive. A fragile ceasefire, shifting battle lines, and lingering diplomatic doubts define the complex conflict.
The war between Russia and Ukraine, now in its third year, remains a complex and evolving conflict. While hopes for peace flicker, the reality on the ground tells a story of shifting positions and enduring uncertainty. In March 2025, a glimmer of hope emerged as Ukraine and the United States agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, contingent on Russia's approval. This temporary pause aims to facilitate humanitarian relief and discussions on a broader peace process. However, Russia's response remains ambiguous, with no signs of concessions. The Kremlin continues its strategy of prolonging the war, aiming to exhaust Ukraine and its international supporters. On the battlefield, both sides are locked in a deadly dance. Ukrainian forces have made gains near Turetsk and Pokrovsk, while Russian troops have advanced in Kursk Oblast and Donbas region. Drone strikes and missile barrages punctuate the conflict, with each side striving for tactical advantages. Despite these movements, analysts suggest that neither side is positioned for a decisive victory. The war risks becoming a prolonged stalemate, with both nations struggling to achieve their strategic goals. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky remains optimistic, asserting that peace is closer than many believe. Yet he emphasizes that Ukraine must negotiate from a position of strength. Meanwhile, international allies continue to provide military aid, but questions linger about whether this support will be sufficient to tip the scales. As the world watches, the question persists: will this war truly end? The answer lies not only in military maneuvers, but also in political will and from global powers. For now, peace remains an elusive dream in a landscape scarred by conflict.
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the Russia-Ukraine war, where we'll try to answer the questions about will the war really end, as well as the changing positions in the war between Russia and Ukraine. We're joined by both Dr. Sergei Markov from Moscow, the former advisor of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Dr. Sergei Zahir, a Russian affairs researcher. Thank you both for joining us here on Think Tank. Let's start off with Dr. Markov. Given Ukraine's tactical shifts in Kursk, how does Russia perceive its evolving strategic advantage?
It's more or less clear that the main goal of Vladimir Zelensky was not to take control of the 50 or 60 villages in Kursk region and one small, very small city, Sudzha. But first of all, Zelensky tried to take control of the Kursk atomic power station. That's why Kursk region had been chosen. But he was not able to do it. And then Vladimir Zelensky decided to keep control of the Kursk region to show that Ukrainian army is strong enough for doing this. That's why Western countries should give more weaponry to Ukrainian army, and Russian army more weak, and it was also some kind of personal attention of Vladimir Putin from Zelensky. Also, Vladimir Zelensky wants to make exchange of the territories in Kursk region on the territories of in Kharkov region, which is partly under the Russian control. But after some preparation, Russian army, in fact, took control back on about more than 90% of those territories which have been occupied by Ukrainian army. And my prediction that during this week, this time of occupation of part of the Kursk region by Ukrainian army will be over. And Russian army probably will join Sumy region, which is neighboring to the Kursk region, but it's part of the Ukraine officially. At the same time, population of Sumy region also Russian people, and when they had chance to vote, they all the time voted for mostly pro-Russian politicians on the Ukrainian skin. This is we can see the finalization of this Zelensky Kursk region plan.
So this is basically why the Russians have reservations. If we could get Dr. Zahir's opinion as well, how significant are the reported US-Russia talks considering the ongoing battlefield dynamics, especially given what Dr. Markov just spoke about the gains in the Kursk region?
Good morning to you and to the viewers and the honorable guest. I think these are very important talks to end this ongoing conflict for 3 years. All kinds of weapons and arms have been used. A high volume of rockets the Russian and Ukrainian territories. This is the historical moments with the United States administration wanting to end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but there are a lot of obstacles and challenges. The Ukraine wanted to place a heavy military existence in Kursk to be a negotiating card, and consequently I think that the Russian side is, in addition, the Ukrainian army is now struggling and will not be able to keep up the military operations. On the other side, who wants to impose conditions here in these talks. These talks might take weeks and weeks, and we have witnessed phone calls between Trump and Putin regarding the talks with the Russian side, and there is a constant coordination between the foreign affairs ministers in Russia and the State Department in the United States. The United States does not want this to lead to a third world war. Russia will not take any strategic defeat, and that's why they are trying to mobilize more nuclear weapons. In addition, we are facing a different issue. Russia, the international community will not accept Russia expanding its military operation in Ukraine. So that's why we here all parties are trying to reach some sort of balance. It's highly sophisticated and complicated. And this is a very complex scene. There is the European Union, there is Russia, the United States, different parties with different visions. The United States is taking a lot of interest in post-war agreements and in economic investment agreements, but on the front war there is no agreement reached yet. There are 10,000 European troops that are called the protected troops now being deployed. I think this will be a topic of discussion, and this will take weeks to reach the desired truce.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we could get Dr. Markov's opinion on this, I don't know if you caught what Dr. Zehu was talking about. He talked about the idea that, the international community will not accept, Russians' further incursions into the Ukrainian territories and accepting it as is. With the US-Russia talks ongoing, what are the Kremlin's non-negotiable terms when it comes to the ceasefire? And does this include the land gains that that the Russians have made in the Ukrainian territories?
First of all, Russia don't regard that Ukraine is a sovereign country, because from a Russian point of view, Ukraine is neo-colony, and Russia don't regard that Vladimir Zelensky...
The international community regards it as a separate entity and a separate country.
International community recognizes that juridically Ukraine is a sovereign country, but in fact, politically, Ukraine is neo-colony, and this is shared by everybody, including those who say, repeat 1,000 times that Ukraine is independent. They know very well with themselves that Ukraine is not independent, but they are lying directly that Ukraine is independent. Ukraine is neo-colony of the Western coalition. Western coalition now split. On one side, we see European Union and Great Britain who want to continue this war against Russia, and United States who want to stop this war against Russia. We regard this war as proxy war of Western coalition against Russia. And the main goal of Russia in such conflict is to stop formation of anti-Russia on the territory of Ukraine by Western countries, by Western coalition. Because we regard this as exactly what Western countries doing. They're doing by terror during more than 10 years, anti-Russians from Ukrainians and anti-Russia from Ukraine. They want to make a relation between Russia and Ukraine as between Jewish and Palestinians, as between Pakistan and India. It's what Russia does not agree. Russia say that the real solution of Ukrainian crisis is coming back to democracy. Because now, we stress it many times, no democracy in Ukraine. It's authoritarian repressive regime, combination of neo-colony and personal power of Vladimir Zelensky. And the main dictator of Ukraine is intelligence service of Great Britain and partly even United States, even under the Donald Trump. So solution is to give Ukraine back to democracy, because Ukrainians want to live in peace, but Western countries use terror and violence to demand Ukrainians to fight against Russians. And issue of territory, it's second issue. Most important is the political system of Ukraine. Also, it doesn't matter who will be the president, Zelensky or somebody else. It's absolutely not matter. The matter is that system of terror, which mostly use neo-Nazi organization, should be stopped, and free and fair elections should happen. And I will say a very simple example, which understandable for everybody. Why Ukraine is not democracy? Very easily, former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, which can be overthrown during the military putsch in 2014, not able to take part in elections. We believe that Viktor Yanukovych for president, in fact, much more popular would be compared with Vladimir Zelensky if Viktor Yanukovych take part in those elections. But he's not allowed to take part. That's why it was not free elections. It's not democracy, and it's a repressive neo-colony state.
Okay, so basically, to summarize, you're saying that it includes, you consider it a neo-colony, it's not a democracy, in addition to not wanting to give up the lands that have already been taken during military operations.
Yeah, that's not important.
Yes.
What is important?
What about NATO aspirations?
Ukraine is Ukraine, or Ukraine is anti-Russia.
Yes. What about NATO aspirations for the Ukrainians wanting to join NATO?
It's a continuous occupation of Ukraine. That's why Russia fully against this. Also, European countries talking about their possible role as peacekeepers. We want them go away. You're not peacekeepers. You're part of the war. Okay. You cannot be neutral.
Okay, if we can get Dr. Zahir's opinion on this. I don't know if you got what Dr. Markov was talking about. He talked about like the idea of Russia being or considering Ukraine a neo-colony, and that it's not a democracy and so forth. What are your thoughts on these issues, and how will this affect ceasefire negotiations?
First, we talk about colonies, the military bases. There are only 10 countries around the world that call themselves colonies. Whether economically or military-wise, the same with the classifying regimes, whether dictatorships or democracies. I think it's very difficult to classify. For instance, the NATO states, including Germany, for instance, they were colonies for the United States, military-wise. So it's very clear the Russian request is to liberate Ukraine from this colonization. We have seen the Orthodox Church advocating for the same, and the negotiations led by President Putin now talked about liberating Ukraine without talking about a clear regime. A regime that is similar to Georgia. Last year they tried to face Russia and the Russian pressures, and we have seen what happened in the southern areas. Right now the war scenario was more comprehensive. the Russian state talked over and over about not regarding that there are no obstacles impeding economic coalition, but the Russian issue now is that
بالإضافة إنه هذه الدولة يجب أن تحترم الخصوصية الروسية للشعب، مكانة اللغة الروسية كلغة ما معينة. هذا الشيء موجود في عدة دول بالعالم. على سبيل المثال اللغة الرسمية في كندا ليست لغة واحدة، في سويسرا عدة لغات رسمية.
we need to see and we have seen initiatives to respect the Russian language as to find two official languages in Russia. The Russian languages is now being restored and respected. I think that these Russian requests on the official front
أما فيما يتعلق بشكل هذا أو المسار الذي يؤدي إلى هذه العملية هو مسار صعب، لأن الأطراف الأوروبية لا ترغب بشكل أو بآخر بأخذ بعين الاعتبار بهذه الأوراق أو النقاط اللي هي كانت مسودة موجودة في اسطنبول.
I apologize, Dr. Markov, if we can get your opinion, because we're almost out of time here. How does Russia reconcile its stated desire for peace with the continued drone strikes reported by Ukraine?
Russia wants peace very much because, from our point of view, Ukraine part of the Russia, and it's politically neo-colony. Juridically, it's independent, but culturally and by civilizationally, Ukraine is part of the Russia during 1,000 years, and something about 75% of the population in Ukraine, they are Russians. They speak Russian language, and they're part of the Russia during 1,000 years. So Russia wants to stop this war, but because the decision is making not by Vladimir Zelensky, but by Western leaders. And we know from the experience of two previous ceasefires, Minsk 1 agreement and Minsk 2 agreement, that this ceasefire could be only used for strengthening of Ukrainian army and for preparation of Ukrainian army for the next stage of the war, more big war. That's why Russian suggestions that any ceasefire should stop catastrophic development on the same way which we already had after Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 agreement. That's why Russia suggested very simple things. During this ceasefire, Western countries should stop supplying of Ukrainian army by weapons, and Ukraine should stop a violent mobilization to the Ukrainian army. And so the Western countries should stop training of the Ukrainian soldiers. So if Western countries agree with this, Russia can sign a ceasefire very quickly.
Okay, if we can get Dr. Zahir's opinion, how do you see, or how does the European coalition support influence Russia's calculations when it comes to this conflict?
Of course, the European coalition will contribute very majorly. So far, the European assistance were very generous. In general, the European assistance played an integral part to balance the general budget and to support the public servants in Ukraine. But what happened that the European support is not sufficient because there has been many occasions when the military suffered. Now that's why Ukraine is trying to join the NATO because the NATO budget is 1/3 the US military budget. That's why we have seen in the negotiations that took place in the White House to stop and cut the military support and the logistical support We have seen this US threat which led to the Ukraine decline. We have seen the US stance when they talked about the logistics and the intelligence and the satellite.
I apologize. I have to cut you off there because we're out of time for this episode. But thank you both for joining us. That was Dr. Sergei Markov, a former advisor of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Dr. Sid Izehir, a Russian affairs researcher. Thank you both for joining us here on Think Tank, and thank you for your insights. Amidst shifting front lines and fragile talks, the question lingers: will this conflict heal to peace, or will the world witness a protracted struggle to reshape global order? That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you so much for watching. For more here on Q News.